We now have time for our panel discussion. And again, the format is that you get to ask any questions. We have our students with a microphone who will come to you. And so all you need to do is just raise your hand and you can ask a question. And while we're getting settled, I had a question for Maria. So Maria, you mentioned that the Puerto Rico plant got up and running, but one of the issues, at least from the outside we were hearing, is getting product in and out of the island and all the constraints with it. So how was that part of the logistics resolved so the rest of the world could get supply?
Well, one of the things that we do for preparation for the hurricane is to move as much product off the island as possible in the weeks. As soon as we hear the storm is coming, anything in a product final form, we would try to move off the island. We have backup generation capacity. We could run the entire facility, although it would be difficult, but we certainly have enough to keep all of the refrigerated storage conditions up, all of the warehouses running, all of the basic things that we need at the manufacturing facility. Having lived there, for any of you who are from the islands or know about the islands, it's very hot and humid in general. After a storm, it's even more so with lots of rain, and mold will grow on your walls in about 3 days. So you have to have kind of a lot of that. So you have to be, I think, prepared from that aspect. We actually got a corporate jet. I'm very proud to say the first pharma company. Our corporate jet was landed on the island 3 days after the storm on Sunday. The storm occurred on Wednesday. We put insulin on that plane. Therefore, we got in under disaster relief. And other than the insulin, we loaded the plane with the list. The first thing on the list were baby diapers, flashlights, batteries, everything that we could fit onto the plane. We continued to take the corporate jet in and out until we could get other transport. But then we began arranging transport by working with other pharma companies, working with other industries, trucking product to Miami or anywhere that we could get a boat going. And someone referred to it earlier, but we discovered at some point that boats were going to the island, but they weren't bringing anything off the island. And so we were able to coordinate in order to begin to facilitate transport both on and off the island.
So Srisu, for you, for Houston and you mentioned this sort of business opportunity where people saw you could get better rates for your cars, etc. So there was presumably, and then you talked about all these tow trucks. So earlier there was a discussion, and I think Sergio brought it up, that while you're running your own business, you want to coordinate with the authorities who have many other goals. And they say, you got to sell cars, but you get people out, etc. So how was that part coordinated so that you come across as a good citizen while you're serving the insurance companies?
The reason we talk about 14 days and not 3 days when the pickup is because we always lag behind any humanitarian efforts. So we don't get in the way. And that is actually the prep time for us to say, do we have the land? There are environmental regulations that we have to follow. These are cars that leak fluids, for lack of a better description. And you can't just put them in parking lots, regular parking lots, because there's not zoned for those kind of things. We had to get exemptions if we think that there's going to be out of zoning type of issues that we need to get through. There's a lot of prep work that we need to do while the humanitarian effect that is going on. We never interfere with that. You're right, we have to coordinate a lot with folks. Even when we pick up cars, we have to contact local authorities to make sure that we have access, number one, and we're not impeding other work that's actually going on. Otherwise, if it's humanitarian, it'll be a much shorter lead time and we get these cars out of the way. In some cases, we have to accelerate it because it's actually prohibiting work that needs to go on in that space. Cars are actually blocking.
In the Puerto Rico example, can you talk a little bit about how Eli Lilly was organized and the organizational structure you used to coordinate all these various activities that you've talked about?
Yeah, so if you're on the island, we have a general manager on the island. Her and the team there in Puerto Rico were doing all of the local on-site coordination. They were coordinating also with other pharma companies, and they were coordinating with government entities that were necessary to support things on the island. Within Indianapolis, anytime we have any kind of a disaster of any type, we set up an incident support team. It's run by our health, safety, and environmental organization. And we had them actively working. There were one of the large issues in Puerto Rico was no communication. This is why it took us so long to find employees, because you can't imagine having 0 cell service and 0 internet. It's the first time, at least in the history of my career, where we could not find ways to communicate for days with people. So one of the things that we had done ahead of the storm is the site has satellite radios. Now, you have to be outdoors for these to work, so if it's raining, it doesn't work very well. You can't be inside a facility. But we had satellite radios, and we had satellite radios in Indianapolis. So we were able to maintain communication with a very few individuals, and we had daily, hourly calls in some cases where we were going back and forth. This is how we were doing things like funneling the list in terms of what did employees need. You know, every employee, honestly, employees are very committed. At least our employees are extremely committed individuals. They want to go to work as best they can. So within a few days of the storm, almost everybody made their way to work. We weren't actually running operations, but anybody who came to work, they were put on a shift and they started working again. It was important for people psychologically because they wanted something that was normal in their life, because everything at home, I mean, even today, I know people there who don't have electricity. Now, imagine the storm was months ago, and they're still living without electricity in their home. But work is a good place because you get a hot shower, and the cafeteria is up with a hot meal. You could take home bottled water and ice every day. The cafeteria is making extra food for people to take home. So they were doing a lot of things on the island. Meanwhile, in the daily calls, they were funneling a list to us. That's how we knew they needed diapers and baby formula and generators and all the things that they needed. So we were sending the list back and forth. We were then coordinating across the U.S. with other entities that we needed to be coordinating with, including global transportation companies and logistic companies, as an example, trying to figure out how we could get a hold of planes or boats or get space with other companies, et cetera. So we had a very good linkage between the two, and then the networks out from each of those. I had a call with all my heads of manufacturing pharma counterparts 2 or 3 times a week. IT had a big call because trying to get IT back up and running. And you can imagine IT is not just for communication, because we can't run our facilities without IT. I mean, we're paperless for the most part in a lot of our manufacturing facilities. So the thought of going back to papers in this day and age is nearly impossible for a highly sophisticated type of manufacturing operation. So we had various then layers. Engineering was doing the same with their counterparts. And they were doing this across the island and in Indianapolis. And then on our daily calls, we were checking all of those signals and trying to do a coordination.
Can you please share your thoughts on the possible collaboration of Berkshire Hathaway, Amazon, and JP Morgan Chase in the pharma industry?
Yeah, I mean, I know in terms of Amazon, at least to date, they have not really gotten into delivery of products that require very tight temperature control. You know, most of our products, like throughout the world, including in the US, are sold through a wholesaler chain. Wholesalers then deliver to CVS or Walmart or wherever where you go to get the product as a patient, or to a hospital. So, you know, I know we're staying in close contact with those kinds of firms around the different kinds of service offerings they have and where they're going with their service offerings. But at least to date, I know that Amazon has not really gotten into that. Now, I find it interesting that they bought Whole Foods because, you know, Whole Foods, you know, food doesn't probably have a strict, although it has pretty strict controls around what has to be frozen or refrigerated. Because if they actually get into a lot of home delivery from Whole Foods or shipping of that, then to me that opens up another avenue for Amazon to, you know, be collaborative into the temperature control. And of course, I'm voting for Amazon to come to Indianapolis as their second world headquarters. And, you know, people like Purdue students can offer a great set of services as employees. So let's root for Amazon coming.
So I think a related thing, which I think I'm reading into that question, is their goal of getting into healthcare supply chains and offer HMO services.
Yeah.
Because I think between these 3 companies at 800,000, I remember many years ago when I think there was a project we were doing with Chrysler, and the procurement manager said, you know, you're focusing on the wrong procurement.
Yeah.
Don't worry about the gears and help us procure healthcare because
Yeah.
we want to sign deals with
Yeah.
Lilly and other people and just give them a fixed upfront payment, being agnostic about the specific things. So do you see that happening whereby it's a direct contract between a General Motors and an Eli Lilly for $500 million worth of product with some assured pricing, bypassing all the drug distributors, or do you see that not being?
I'm probably not the best to comment on that. I personally don't see that
Okay.
anywhere in the near future. I think it's more likely that we would have a more direct collaboration with the CVSs or Walmarts of the world
Okay.
than we would. If you look at it from a competitive healthcare, I think the challenge is where's Google going and where's Apple going? And where's technology going that would, other than just being able to give you your heart rate, what wearables are you going to have and what data are they going to give you? And then therefore, what does that open up in terms of access to healthcare?
Hi, my name is Darren Young. I'm a senior, actually starting at Lilly this August.
Woo! Meet all your Lilly colleagues today. Make sure you meet these people.
So I'm actually starting in the information security team, and I know we talked a lot about natural disasters and how that disrupts supply chain. So from a cybersecurity standpoint, how can things such as like these big hacks that are happening to even some of our vendors, and how can that disrupt the supply chain, and what are we doing to proactively monitor that?
Yeah. Well, obviously, this is a big concern to the company and to all of us from our own personal data perspective. We have a large cybersecurity team, growing larger by the day, actually, trying to stay ahead of the technology curve. And I think the way some of our networks were set up, at least in the manufacturing space, we did a wall off of each of our manufacturing sites a number of years ago so that they could be, we run SAP, but they could be disconnected from that network for periods of time to ensure that at least within a facility that you had a bit more security. But this is a constantly changing environment and one where people are finding more and more ways to get in. There was another pharma company, one of the other major companies, our competitor, that unfortunately got hit with one of these. And their manufacturing was down in a number of their plants within their network for months. They had significant issues as a result of it. It was a bug that any of us could have had get into our system. Fortunately, Lilly was not one of those. But I think this hits every aspect. And a personal quick story that I'll share is my mother was hospitalized a couple of years ago with a broken bone and was due to have a surgery. And one of these emails, these fake emails, came into the hospital. And, of course, we're always testing ourselves within Lilly to see if you click on the wrong email and how many times you're clicking on the wrong email. But a number of employees did click on it. And the entire hospital was down during her stay there. And honestly, I was very nervous with her going into surgery because there was nothing working. I mean, you couldn't get food from the cafeteria without a hand order. All the meds went back, given multiple times a day, to paper. A lot of the hospital staff were young enough, they had never worked on a full paper system. Scheduling of the surgery, every single aspect of your business is immediately impacted if you have one of these issues that hits. And it's a serious concern to all of us, as well as, we have a lot of devices, or pens. Let's say someone uses a pen, and these devices are getting more sophisticated. So what about people tacking into these? And attacking, getting into your own individual device that's doing some kind of a monitoring of your own health and, changing something. You've seen this in movies, someone changes someone's pacemaker as an example. So this is hitting every aspect of our business, and it's extremely concerning to us.
One of the connected pieces of business continuity planning and cybersecurity is becoming more and more important is what we consider enterprise risk management. More and more boards are looking at enterprise risk management. 20 years back, it was important, but it was not, cybersecurity was not as important as it is today. And as you think about technologies, we are looking at mobility in automobiles, where it's not too far. It's 2020, I think, is the first fully autonomous car will be commercially available for purchase. You're talking about potential threats from a cybersecurity standpoint where they can take over the control of the car. Today, you don't worry about that. If something goes wrong, you kind of have a diagnostic or a beep on your dashboard and you can pull over. But those kind of threats are completely new to us. And the board conversations around enterprise risk management is taking on a completely different tone around cybersecurity. Our board is very keenly aware of it. It's one of the things that is a mandatory agenda item in every board meeting every 2 months.
Last question.
Yeah, so staying on the technology train, just curious for your general comments of applications of blockchain to both of your fields and where you see that kind of playing more and timeline and implementation there.
Yeah, we have a innovation lab around blockchain. We have an innovation lab around RPA, if you guys use RPA. It's not related necessarily, but it's one of the buzzwords that are going around right now. Blockchain is very applicable to us. If you think about chain of custody for us is either an insurer taking control of a car, passing it on to us, we take custody, we sell it, and then we have to pass custody to somebody else. There's paperwork that goes along with that, not only the title paperwork, but also from a transactional paperwork that goes along with that. It's a great blockchain application. And then I can give you many more cases. We're a marketplace, so blockchain is a perfect application for us. We're connecting buyers and sellers, and we're doing the transaction seamlessly for them. The issue around blockchain that I've seen in almost every industry application right now is because you need multiple parties in a blockchain, it becomes harder to implement. It's hard enough to implement if you're the only one doing it in a company. I think everybody who works at a corporate entity will kind of agree with that. Now you're saying that there are 3 or 4 parties that need to agree and there are smart contracts in place. Yes, you can get there. But there is always, if they don't know much about it and they don't think that there's somehow a loss of control in that, it takes a long time from a change management standpoint to get them on board in this. Another great one is title. Title, everybody owns a car here in the US has a title. Title's a state mandate. It's a state controlled thing. It's not a federally controlled thing. So every state has a different title requirement. And the handling of titles is very different. Not only the process, but timelines, how you procure a title. I think Arizona went to an electronic title recently. Almost no state has an electronic title. But titling would be a great blockchain application as well. But it involves now 50 regulatory or government bodies that you need to convince they need to come on the same blockchain application. There are several applications, it's just harder inherently to implement.
I would just say that it's something that I know Lily's evaluating, particularly between the U.S. affiliate, more so than some of the other countries. And there are a lot of parties involved in pharma as well, and it sounds much easier than it is to actually do. I think progress will be made in that. And, if you think about it, years ago when I was in supply chain, if you looked at the U.S. market as an example, we could predict that there was probably, after Lilly, maybe 60 days of product in the supply chain. So if you're a patient and something happens inside the company, you have a long time to get reaction to that. Today, my guess is that's less than 30 days, and in many cases, down to a 10 or 15 day. Why is that? Well, we used to sell to wholesalers who then sold to retailers who carried at many, many locations, and then they sold to many, many pharmacies. But, today, wholesalers are buying retailers and they're combining. So in some cases, you've removed one entire set of inventory from the whole chain. Pharmacies are expecting daily delivery. They don't have as much place to hold product in a pharmacy, so hospitals may want multiple times per day delivery. We promise delivery in something like 3 days, no matter where it is in the US. So when you begin to add all those things up, it really shrinks the amount of time. Therefore, from an internal inventory planning perspective, we have to think about that, because we always know if something happens, there's not as much product out there. But to me, it's a perfect application to go much more direct than we are today because of that. But breaking through those barriers is extremely difficult.